freaked out, of course. I had just married this guy. We built this house. And I was going, oh my God, your country really doesn't want me there.
In 1986, Linda Kozlowski was filming with real crocodiles. Armed guards stood in trees with rifles. She slept in abandoned uranium mining huts, all for Crocodile Dundee. The movie made her famous. It also made her a homewrecker. Her co-star left his wife and 5 kids for her. Australia hated her. She got death threats daily. But the worst part came later. After 23 years of marriage, she discovered something that changed everything. Now she's Muslim, lives in Morocco, and runs tours for millionaires. Why? The real reason will shock you. Linda Kozlowski was born on January 7, 1958, in Fairfield, Connecticut. Her parents had left post-war Poland and arrived in the United States searching for something better. They were originally named Helena and Stanisław, but they changed their names to Helen and Stanley to blend in. They came with almost nothing, but they worked hard to give their daughter a better life. For them, America meant safety and opportunity. For Linda, it would become the place where she chased and caught fame. She went to Andrew Ward High School and graduated in 1976. Even back then, people noticed her talent. In school plays, she didn't just act, she led. She memorized not only her own lines, but sometimes the whole script. She even stepped in to help others when things went wrong. Her performance as Emily in Our Town got local buzz. Some people said she made them cry. That's rare for a high school performance. But Linda already stood out, and everyone who saw her perform knew it. She didn't stop there. She got into the Juilliard School in New York City, which is extremely hard to do. Fewer than 1 in 12 make it. Most students focus on one thing. Linda took on 2, acting and opera singing. That wasn't normal. It meant long hours, packed schedules, and very little sleep. But she pushed through it all. Teachers remembered how easily she could switch from a dramatic monologue to singing an Italian aria. She was serious, focused, and even then, people could see she was building something bigger. By 1981, at just 23 years old, she stepped onto the professional stage. She was cast in an off-Broadway show called How It All Began. The play dealt with themes like immigration and identity, which connected deeply with her own life. More than 200 actresses had auditioned, but Linda landed the part. Critics noticed. One called her a revelation. It wasn't just a compliment. It was the kind of review that sticks with casting directors. For her, this wasn't just a good performance. It was the start of everything. Then came Death of a Salesman. It was 1984, and she got a small role in a huge production. The play was a Broadway revival of the Arthur Miller classic, and it was packed with big names. Linda played Miss Forsyth. It wasn't a lead role, but she made people notice. Her scenes stood out. The New York Times praised her for bringing a new energy to the character. That performance didn't just earn her respect in theater, it got her noticed in Hollywood. And soon, a new opportunity came calling. In 1985, producers were casting for a strange little film from Australia. It was called Crocodile Dundee. The idea was simple: pair a rugged Aussie with a smart, curious American woman and drop them into wild situations. The team didn't want a big star. They wanted someone fresh. Linda auditioned. She had some TV experience and theater work, but she wasn't famous. Dozens of other actresses wanted the part. But when she read lines opposite Paul Hogan, something clicked. Their chemistry wasn't forced. It was natural. She got the role. It came with a 3-movie deal worth $500,000. That was a huge offer for someone with little screen experience. But she didn't just take the money and show up. She prepared. She learned Australian slang. She studied the culture. She wanted Sue Charlton to feel real, not like an outsider pretending. When filming began, everything worked. The humor, the romance, the charm, it all came together. The making of Crocodile Dundee was just as wild as the film itself. One of the most intense moments came during a river attack scene in Australia's Northern Territory. Linda Kozlowski, who played Sue Charlton, was nearly dragged into the water by a massive crocodile, at least on screen. But behind the scenes, it wasn't all acting. The crew used a mechanical crocodile for close-up shots, but real crocodiles were swimming nearby the entire time. Armed crew members were stationed in trees, rifles ready, just in case a real croc got too close. The filming took place in Kakadu National Park, far from anything resembling a movie set. There were no hotels, no trailers. The cast and crew slept in old huts left behind by uranium miners. Every take felt like a gamble. The fear you see on screen, it wasn't just acting. Off-camera, things were just as intense. Paul Hogan, the star and co-writer of the film, was going through a personal crisis. He had married Noeline Edwards back in 1958. They raised 5 children together. But by the time filming started in 1985, their marriage was hanging by a thread. They had already divorced once in 1981, then remarried less than a year later. Now they were heading for a second, very public divorce. And right in the middle of all that, sparks were flying between Hogan and Linda Kozlowski. Their chemistry on screen was real. So real, in fact, that rumors started to swirl. Australian tabloids were quick to call Kozlowski a homewrecker. Hogan later admitted, "I'm not a great husband, I'm good early." The emotion bleeding into his performance wasn't fake. It was his life falling apart in real time. There was one moment in the film that almost didn't make it, at least not the way we remember it. The scene where Mick Dundee says, "That's not a knife, that's a knife," is now legendary, but it was nearly ruined by laughter. Linda Kozlowski just couldn't keep a straight face. Hogan's delivery was so dry, so perfect, that every time he said the line, she burst out laughing. It took 47 takes to get it right. 47. Filming on a busy New York street is tough enough, but this turned into a comedy routine. Even the crew couldn't hold it together, but somehow that frustration turned into magic. The scene became one of the most quoted in film history. And that laughter, though hidden in the final cut, told a bigger story about the connection between the two stars. That connection didn't just light up the screen, it lit up the awards circuit too. In 1987, Linda Kozlowski earned a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was her very first major film. She was up against some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Diane Wiest and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. Nobody expected her to be in that category. She was still new, still unknown to most audiences, but there she was, walking red carpets, giving interviews, and proving that raw talent could stand toe-to-toe with seasoned stars. It was the kind of Cinderella story that Hollywood loves, but this time it came from a small Australian film that no one thought would make it big. Except it did. Crocodile Dundee was a box office monster. On a budget of just $8.8 million, it pulled in over $328 million worldwide. It dominated United States theaters for 9 straight weeks and became the second highest-grossing film of 1986. Only Top Gun made more money. For Linda Kozlowski, that meant her debut performance made her one of the highest-grossing first-time actresses of the entire decade. Not bad for someone who was sleeping in mining huts just months earlier. The success of the film didn't just change her career, it launched her into pop culture history. Her face was suddenly everywhere, and her role in one of the most successful comedies of all time remains a high bar that very few newcomers have ever reached again. Paul Hogan was already a star in Australia when Crocodile Dundee made him a global name in 1986. But behind the scenes, something far more personal was unfolding. While filming the movie, Hogan fell for his American co-star Linda Kozlowski. The timing couldn't have been worse. He was still legally married to his longtime wife, Noeline Edwards. It wasn't just any marriage. Hogan had married Noeline in 1958, divorced her in 1981, then remarried her in 1982. By the time they split for good in 1989, they had been together for over 30 years and had 5 children. The moment Hogan filed for divorce the second time, the public took notice. It wasn't just a private breakup anymore. Crocodile Dundee was a massive hit, and suddenly everyone was watching. People wondered if the marriage ended because of Kozlowski. She was almost 20 years younger, and their on-screen chemistry felt too real. Both Hogan and Kozlowski claimed the romance only started when his marriage was already falling apart. But the overlap was too clear to ignore. Fans were stunned. Hogan had been seen as the perfect family man, and now he was leaving his wife for a younger woman from Hollywood. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Australian tabloids called it the Outback affair. It was splashed across headlines in Sydney and Los Angeles. Paparazzi followed them everywhere. Reporters tracked hotel stays, flight records, and even camped outside their homes. The more they tried to keep things quiet, the louder the gossip got. Hogan was being called a traitor to the Aussie ideal, and Kozlowski became a symbol of everything the public hated about Hollywood drama. People didn't just talk, they acted. Kozlowski started receiving hate mail and even death threats. Angry fans called her the homewrecker. She was blamed for destroying a 23-year marriage and a well-loved family. She had only just become famous, and now she was the target of deep hatred. She began avoiding public events and hired security for safety, all while Hogan's ex-wife Noeline was seen as the wounded mother of 5, raising the kids on her own. Sympathy poured in for her. Fury followed Kozlowski. It was no longer just a scandal, it had turned dangerous. For over a year, Hogan and Kozlowski tried to hide everything. They met secretly in hotel rooms and used fake names at check-in. They arrived separately, left separately, and even used coded messages to communicate. Few people knew what was really going on. Living like that took its toll. The secrecy, the lies, the pressure, it all became too much. Eventually, the truth came out. By then, Hogan's marriage was over. His public image had changed forever. When Crocodile Dundee 2 came out in May 1988, it wasn't just a hit, it was a global box office beast. It made over $239 million worldwide, even though it only cost $14 million to make. People everywhere flocked to see Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski back on screen. And this time, Linda got a huge raise. Her paycheck jumped 240% from the first film. She earned $1.2 million for the sequel. That sounds like a win, but there was a catch. Paul Hogan still earned more. He was the star, yes, but also the co-writer. Still, the pay gap was hard to ignore. The sequel shattered records. In Australia, it made $24.9 million, almost $60 million today. In the United States, it opened with $24.5 million during the Memorial Day weekend. That was the biggest comedy opening ever at the time. It even became the 5th highest-grossing movie of 1988. Linda was now a global star. But even with all that success, she wasn't treated as an equal in Hollywood. After the movie's success, scripts started pouring in. But there was a problem. They all looked the same. Linda was only offered roles like the girlfriend or the pretty sidekick. No leads, no depth, just eye candy next to a funny man. She got offers for Ghost, Pretty Woman, and Basic Instinct. All of them would go on to become iconic films. Pretty Woman made over $463 million. Basic Instinct turned Sharon Stone into a legend. But Linda said no. She didn't want to be another pretty face on screen with no real role to play. It shocked people in the industry. Who turns down roles like that? But Linda wanted more. She had trained for serious parts. She wanted to be seen for her talent, not just her looks. Then came Pass the Ammo. It was supposed to be something different. A dark comedy with Bill Paxton. It had an $8 million budget and a bold take on televangelism. But it bombed badly. It only made $169,000. That's a loss of more than $7.8 million. The movie disappeared fast. It was pulled from theaters almost immediately. For Linda, it was a major setback. One moment, she was riding high from a global hit. The next, she was part of one of the year's biggest flops. The industry didn't take it well. Instead of blaming the script or direction, people blamed her, and the roles got even smaller. The truth was, Linda Kozlowski wasn't just a pretty face on screen. She had trained at Juilliard. She had performed on Broadway. She had real talent and serious experience. But Hollywood didn't care. All they saw was Paul Hogan's girlfriend. That wasn't just her role in the movie, it became her label in real life. They got married in 1990, which only made it harder for her to escape the stereotype. Even when she came back for Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles in 2001, it felt like she was stuck in time. Her other work didn't matter, her training didn't matter. All people saw was the American girl in the Australian comedy. By 1989, she had enough. She told her agent she was ready to quit. She was tired of the scripts, tired of being sidelined, tired of Hollywood acting like she didn't have anything else to offer. She had just come off a box office disaster. She had watched other actresses soar with roles she turned down, and she was still being treated like a backup character in her own career. It wasn't just frustrating, it was heartbreaking. She was willing to walk away from fame and money just to escape the trap. Linda Kozlowski didn't become a mother easily. For nearly 8 years after marrying Paul Hogan, she struggled to have a child. It was a painful time. She felt stuck, emotionally drained, professionally frustrated, and full of fear that she might never become a mother. When she finally gave birth to their son, Chance, in 1998, she was already 40 years old. It felt like a miracle, a moment she had almost given up on. In an interview a few years later, she said those years were the hardest of her life. She even described herself as miserable during her last 2 acting jobs because all she could think about was having a baby. She wanted it so badly, it consumed her. When Chance was born, it felt like a new life, not just for him, but for her too. By the time she was 43, she said she had finally found peace. "I've got a baby, I'm happy, and I'm content," she said. It was everything she had been hoping for. But even joy couldn't fix everything. The arrival of Chance made it even clearer how different she and Hogan really were. Linda started to feel the pull toward independence. Hogan preferred quiet and family life. They loved their son, but they were drifting apart. Years later, headlines would focus on Chance himself, now in his mid-20s. Reports described him as disheveled. Hogan seemed worried, and those concerns only reminded everyone that even after the cameras stopped rolling, the struggles continue behind closed doors. Linda's acting career wasn't going well either. After her breakout success in Crocodile Dundee, things began to slide. In 1990, she appeared with Hogan again in Almost an Angel. It didn't go well. The movie flopped, and critics were harsh. Roger Ebert called her performance wooden and uninspired. That review hurt. She had once been seen as a rising star. Now, that spotlight was fading fast. As the years went on, the roles got smaller and cheaper. In 1994, she did 2 direct-to-video films, Backstreet Justice and The Neighbor. She later admitted they were schlocky. She hated doing them. She said the stress of working on those kinds of films gave her an ulcer. She felt like she was the only one who actually cared about doing a good job. That kind of environment wore her down. Things weren't easier at home either. She and Hogan were constantly moving, back and forth between Los Angeles and Australia. Part of that had to do with Hogan's tax problems. But for Linda, it meant she never felt settled, never truly at home. Everything felt temporary. In October 2013, after 23 years of marriage, Linda Kozlowski filed for divorce from Paul Hogan. Fans were stunned. This wasn't just any couple. They had fallen in love while filming Crocodile Dundee and stayed together long after the credits rolled. Their relationship had been seen as one of Hollywood's rare success stories. No big scandals, no messy headlines, but behind the calm exterior, things were falling apart. Linda cited irreconcilable differences. To most people, that phrase meant nothing. But in their case, it meant everything had slowly changed. She was tired of waiting for him to step away from his old life. Tired of the distance, both physical and emotional. Paul was still tied to Australia. Linda wanted something else. Once court documents surfaced, the cracks became clearer. Paul Hogan smoked 2 packs a day. Linda had moved on to a cleaner, healthier lifestyle. Their house smelled of smoke, and so did their arguments. On top of that, Paul's drinking had reportedly increased. They fought more. And their teenage son, Chance, was caught in the middle. The home that once held laughter and scripts now held silence and tension. These weren't just habits. They were walls that grew taller between them with each passing year. When the settlement terms were made public, more eyebrows were raised. Linda received $6,250,000. But that money came with strings. No spousal support, no child support. At the time, Chance was just 15. Most celebrity divorces drag on over these issues. This one didn't. Linda wanted out and fast. Some said she was just done with it all. Others believed she was reclaiming her independence after decades of compromise. Either way, she took the lump sum and walked away. In interviews that followed, Linda spoke openly. There was no scandal, no secret betrayal, just two people drifting apart. "We'd become more like roommates than husband and wife," she said. He liked quiet days in Australia. She wanted new experiences. Their conversations had turned into quick chats about the grocery list or school pickups. The love that started on a movie set had quietly faded off-screen. It wasn't explosive, it was slow and silent. The divorce became official on July 23, 2014. That date carried weight. It marked exactly 24 years and 2 months since their wedding day on May 5, 1990. The symmetry was haunting, a neat, clean line from beginning to end. They had spent almost a quarter century together, raised a son, shared a spotlight. But in the end, even strong stories can have soft, quiet endings. The papers were signed. The marriage was over. But for Linda, that wasn't the end of her story. Less than a year later, she found herself walking through the crowded markets of Marrakesh. It was 2015. Just a vacation, or so she thought. That's when she met Moulay Hafid Baba, a charming Moroccan tour guide with a warm smile and deep knowledge of his country's culture. The connection was instant. They talked, laughed, wandered the maze-like streets of the city together. It felt like something out of a film. Linda was 57. She had just closed one chapter and was unexpectedly stepping into another. By 2017, things had changed even more. Linda and Baba were married in a vibrant Moroccan ceremony, attended by over 200 guests. She had converted to Islam and taken the Arabic name Layla. She was learning Arabic, cooking Moroccan dishes, wearing traditional kaftans. The 3-day wedding was full of music, food, and color. Linda called it a rebirth. It was clear she had let go of Hollywood. Then came the next leap. She and Baba launched a luxury travel company called Dream My Destiny. It offered high-end Moroccan tours to American clients, private riads, balloon rides over the Atlas Mountains, dinners with Berber families. The business took off. Over 500 clients came through in just a couple of years. In 2020, they made over $2 million. Linda personally hosted many of the guests. Her past fame helped, but it was her new life that sold the dream. To seal the transition, she sold her Venice Beach apartment in 2018. It fetched $1.8 million. That sunny California home had been her base for years. But she was done with the Pacific. She took the money and bought a riad in Marrakesh's Old Medina. She and Baba restored it room by room. It became their home, filled with antiques, art, and stories. Gone were the scripts and red carpets. In their place were lanterns, spices, and a slower rhythm of life. Linda Kozlowski didn't just leave Hollywood, she walked away from it with purpose. After years in the spotlight, she chose something quieter, something deeper. Now, she splits her life between Marrakesh and Los Angeles. She still holds on to her American citizenship, but her heart has clearly found a second home. In Marrakesh, her mornings begin with the call to prayer echoing through the streets. She runs through the Menara Gardens, past rows of old olive trees. Breakfast is simple but rich: mint tea, fresh bread, sweet amalou, and ripe local fruit. Her days move with the rhythm of the city. She wanders through crowded souks, handpicks spices, chats with vendors, and hunts for hidden gems, restaurants, riads, quiet corners most tourists miss. She's not just exploring, she's curating. With her husband, Moulay Hafid Baba, a seasoned local guide, she runs a custom tour company called Dream My Destiny. They give travelers a more intimate way to see Morocco. And when night falls, it's either a hammam spa or a cozy cafe, soaking in the warm air and city lights. She lives between two worlds, and somehow it all fits. Her old life didn't vanish, it just changed shape. Paul Hogan, the man who once played her on-screen partner and later became her real-life husband, is still part of her story. They married in 1990, after their chemistry in Crocodile Dundee turned into something real. For over 20 years, they shared a life, raised a son, and built memories. When they divorced in 2014, it wasn't bitter. Linda accepted a $6.25 million settlement, but turned down ongoing support. She didn't want legal ties, just a clean break, and a shared responsibility for their son, Chance. Today, Chance is a young man who connects two very different lives. His father's ties to Australia, and his mother's new chapter in Morocco and California. Paul and Linda stayed close. He even congratulated her on her marriage to Mooley and her growing business. There's no public drama, just respect. In a town known for messy breakups, theirs is a rare story of lasting friendship. Linda has no regrets. She speaks clearly about why she walked away from the movie business. After Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles came out in 2001, she was offered roles she described as schlocky, the kind of films that went straight to video. They made her miserable, so much so, she says they gave her ulcers. It wasn't worth it. She was tired of shallow parts and an industry that cared more about money than meaning. So she left, not in anger, but in clarity. In her own words, it was the best decision I ever made. She focused on raising Chance. She built a life far from red carpets and photo calls. Now, she guides travelers through Morocco, explores culture, and finds joy in simple, grounded things. She's become an example, not just of reinvention, but of walking away when something no longer serves you. Her story isn't about leaving fame behind, it's about finding something better.